Welcome everyone to the SciManDan podcast. Thank you so much for joining us again. We're episode 27. I remember saying ages ago I'm going to stop saying the episodes, but I'm still saying them. It's episode 27. It's something slightly different tonight. We haven't got a guest. We have got, obviously, the main man himself. Joining me again, the immovable object that is my co-host, the unstoppable force that is Catz. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Oh, what a jingle. Yes, I'm absolutely fantastic. What a good couple of weeks it's been, mate.
Yeah, it's been all right, isn't it? So I was going to say the Euros. I mean, all of our American listeners right now are like, oh, what's he even talking about? It's coming home, mate, isn't it? It's coming home.
You know what? We are getting stronger and stronger as the tournament goes on, and that's all you can ask for. Are we the only team ever to go the first 5 games without conceding?
We are in the Euros. Apparently in Italia 90, Italy did it in the World Cup for the first 5.
Right.
But I mean, back then Italy were an absolute unit, weren't they, defensively? So, but yeah, I think we are in the Euros the first. I'm holding my hands up. Honestly, I haven't doubted Southgate. And in my opinion, he had a free shot at this Euros after what he did at the World Cup.
Yeah, I think to get us to our first semi-final in nearly 30 years.
Yeah.
A World Cup was brilliant. Really, really good. I wasn't expecting this. I'll be honest. I was expecting. Well, I don't know what I was expecting, but to actually be growing in confidence as the tournament goes on is a surprise to me.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's game.
And I quite like the defense. I mean, everyone banged on about the defensive side of it, but every other tournament we've played, we've gone attacking. We've gone 1-0 up, and then I've had our pants pulled down and we've lost. So I think it's a good tactics how he's playing it at the moment. Very good.
Well, I did read somewhere that there was a breakdown of the analysis, taking past champions from the World Cup and the Euros and kind of analysing and categorising their approach to matches, and the sort of pragmatic defensive grinding away style seems to have been the most successful one. So whether he's deliberately modelled it on that, I don't know, because we have got some possibly quite attacking talent as well.
Yeah. People tuning in now to a science podcast, and we're banging. But I'll tell you what though, if you really delve into tactics, there's a science in that, isn't there? In the tactics of football.
Wasn't it? Oh, my brain is going. The umbrella guy doesn't like orange. Graham Taylor. Oh, yeah. Wasn't Graham Taylor one of the first, if not the first, to actually get statisticians involved? My word. To get those ones to actually analyse how most goals were scored, what created the best opportunities, and that's where the whole long ball came from, because it just turned out that that's where most goals were scored. Yeah, that's Sam Allardyce obviously been reading about that, because that's his entire career, isn't it? He does it well though. Yeah. He was brilliant for Blackburn. He was. No.
Anyway, so hopefully, fingers crossed. So by the time this podcast comes out, we would have known the winners of Italy, Spain, and tonight will be England, Denmark. So fingers crossed we'll get to the final Sunday, and we'll see what happens. Maybe next week we'll be celebrating at the start of the podcast. Who knows?
That will be lovely.
Who knows? Anyway, quick shout out to the if those of you who listen and don't watch the podcast YouTube channel. So the SciManDan podcast has also had its own channel. It's just past 6,000 subscribers. Yay! Well done. I'll leave a link in the description. If you do listen, and you haven't unsubscribed yet, please do, because every week we'll normally have a couple of clips from the episode, visuals. So we record ourselves doing the podcast, and on a Monday the full podcast is out on the YouTube channel, and it's all visual as well. So, and if there's been any visuals, so for example, when we did the moon landing denier episode, I put all of his pictures on the YouTube video so we could see what we were talking about. So it's quite good on that front. We also put the conspiracy chart up as well when we did that episode. So it's slightly different to the audio. So if you want to check it out, please do. Link will be in the description to that podcast channel. 6,000 subscribers. It's growing. We're doing well. So, buddy, I don't know if you might have been catching up with my channel, but the last couple of months I've put out a couple of vaccine videos. The first one I did was talking about what is actually in a vaccine, just in general. So all the different bits and pieces that make up a vaccine, dispelled a few of the myths with that. And the second one I specialised in the COVID vaccines. And I spoke specifically about what the different types were, how they work, and also again dispelled some of those myths as well, the silly ones like the chips in and stuff like that, and the magnetic arm. We've seen all that, haven't we? But it appears from the reaction to that there is still some doubts around this COVID vaccine. I'm just going to read off some figures, some stats that we know. So at this moment in time, there's a shade under 185 million cases worldwide, positive cases. Now, we're right in saying there, aren't we, that we could probably put that number closer to 500 million, because two in three don't necessarily show symptoms, do they?
Absolutely, and there'll be people who got it early in the pandemic who weren't sure what it was, and who just got over it and didn't get tested. Yeah,
exactly. So whilst there's 185 million confirmed positive cases, there is a huge amount more which wouldn't have shown symptoms than those that have contracted it earlier. We're about 3,000 away from 4 million deaths worldwide. That's a massive number, 4 million deaths. I mean, it has slowed, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. I pulled up some fantastic data actually on the vaccines. So as of this moment, 24.2% of the world's population has had at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. I think that's incredible. Almost 25% of the whole population of the world.
1 in 5. Is that just adults, or is that including kids as well?
I think it's 18 and over. So it's 3.2 billion doses have been administered globally.
That is a massive global effort, isn't it?
It's
that
incredible.
Is absolutely incredible.
Absolutely super. I just cannot believe the response. In terms of the share, Canada, us, and Israel have had the most in terms of the percentage share of their population. In terms of vaccines. Another really interesting chart which I saw was the vaccine hesitancy. So obviously we've talked about the people that are hesitant to get the vaccine for whatever reason. When the vaccines first came out, I'm just going to find it quickly. Here we go. When the vaccines first came out in December of last year, almost 20% of the world population were unvaccinated and not willing to get vaccinated. So there was a 20% amount of people that didn't want to get vaccinated, and there was an additional about 15% who were uncertain about getting vaccinated. So we're talking about 35%. As of May the 31st, the people that are not willing to get vaccinated is now close to 10%, and the people that are not sure is now close to 5%. So I think that's a fantastic stat as well, the fact that we've pretty much half the people that are not willing to get vaccinated and who are uncertain.
I think that's brilliant. And what do you think the reason for that is? Do you think people have been coerced into doing that because they think, there's some sort of vaccine passport coming in? Or do you think that the misinformation has just been broken down enough for them to show more trust?
I think so. I mean, there's definitely been a lot more of that. But I mean, in terms of real world stuff, I know someone who was unsure about getting the vaccine. Now, they're not an anti-vaxxer. They're not a conspiracy person. They were just a bit unsure because they were maybe worried about how quickly it came out and stuff like that. And then this person's sister and her husband both contracted COVID and ended up being on ventilators. And I think that was enough to make this person get the vaccine because they didn't want to end up in that position. I think some people don't take it seriously until it actually hits their world, do they?
Well, that's it. When anything's closer to home, it's close to heart, isn't it? And you are going to act on it. And I was going to say, you reminded me of something to say there. Oh God, it came in and it came out. It's great. It'll come back in a second.
Yeah, okay. Another stat I saw, this is widely publicised in the US over the last couple of days. 99.5% of the people that have died from COVID in the last 6 months in the US were unvaccinated. 99.5% of all deaths from COVID in the last 6 months were unvaccinated. I mean, that says a huge amount, doesn't it, for the vaccine's success?
Well, that's it. And there are always going to be people out there who are on that fringe of science denial who are going to claim that vaccines don't do anything, etc. But the data just speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and that's US data. Now, in terms of UK over here, so NHS England figures, on the 20th of December, there were 1,094 people who had COVID on a mechanically ventilated bed. So over 1,000 people in the UK who were needing ventilation assistance because they had COVID. As of the 3rd of June in the UK, there are only 124 people needing ventilation. Now, again, a majority of those are unvaccinated as well. So all the data is pointing to success in terms of the vaccine. It's hard to disagree with that, isn't it?
Well, I say it's absolutely black and white. I mean, the only possible way you could disagree with it is just pure denial. And we know that there are people out there that think like that, and will just deny it no matter what. But I think it's a great statistic. And I remember going on a speed awareness course once because I was a bit naughty. I went a bit too fast on a road.
I've done that.
And they were so boring. One of the questions we got asked was, somebody said that out of all the accidents that cause fatalities now, it's something like a staggering 98% are due to human error. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I remember being one of the only people who put a hand up and said, well, that's actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Because what that means is that the cars are
doing its job. Yeah.
They're not failing on us. They're reliable. Yeah, it's the human error. We're not adding to those with faulty cars. It's a similar thing with the vaccine. I've heard people say, oh, all these people in hospital are unvaccinated. It's their fault. They deserve it. And I disagree with that completely. It's just clearly a case that the vaccines are working, so those who are left are those yet to be vaccinated.
Yeah, they could have been 18 and yet to take up the vaccine. Yeah, it could be any reason. That reminds me of a classic GCSE question with the thinking time and stopping time for physics. That is an absolute banker, isn't it? Like what could affect your stopping distance? That's like the easiest marks going, isn't it?
I used to love those questions. Absolutely, yeah. Kids used to love them. It's a banker.
Right. Okay. So as we know, there's a couple of There's two different types of vaccine, isn't there? I mean, the main ones that we in this country, I think in the States as well. So we've got obviously the AstraZeneca, we've got the Pfizer, and we've got the Moderna. The Pfizer and the Moderna are the RNA vaccines, aren't they? And the AstraZeneca are the more common type of vaccine.
The DNA, isn't it? AstraZeneca, yeah.
So the RNA ones, they work by putting the RNA into the cell, and then that RNA can produce the spike protein. Is that right, isn't it?
Yeah, so they'll put the mRNA, and I think they deliver it with an oil droplet, don't they?
Yes.
That fuses with them, and then the mRNA will allow a protein to be made, which is part of a spike protein. I believe it's not even the whole thing.
Okay.
And then the mRNA, which is something I want to address because I've seen a few people on Twitter saying, well, that mRNA, that genetic material in your cell, is somehow contaminating your own genetics. It's somehow going to cause lasting damage. And, your cells are full of mRNA all the time.
Yeah.
And then it's broken down very quickly all the time. That's why the mRNA vaccines have such a shorter shelf life and need to be frozen, because it gets broken down all the time.
Yeah, and also it doesn't work backwards, does it? The RNA cannot manipulate the DNA. It's the DNA that does it's only one track, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think it's a brilliant, because before all this happened, I really didn't know a great deal about vaccines. When we teach it at school,
no.
We often teach the inject a weakened pathogen. Or a dead pathogen or something, that kind of vaccine. And the whole mRNA vaccine, I only heard about that through, the whole COVID and the research. I think it's absolute genius, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredible. I've recently read about, they're also, Pfizer are also doing some cancer vaccines in the same method with the mRNA. And what's really useful is, say, for example, there is a strain that we can't. It looks like from all the data that the Delta strain, the Indian variant, is being managed by the vaccines. But if there was a variant that was possibly a little bit harder for the vaccines to deal with the mRNA, as simple, isn't it, as taking out one piece of the code, putting in another piece of the code that matches the new variant, and then we've got a brand new vaccine that can boost people.
Well, absolutely. I mean, they've obviously the setup, the infrastructure now is there to set up to produce nucleotide sequences and the delivery mechanisms exactly how they want it now. And I mean, I'm no biochemist. I was actually speaking to a biochemist today. I'll tell you about that another time. But he was just talking me through just how simple and easy it is to create these nucleotide sequences. It's not a problem at all, is it?
Yeah, not at all. And as we were talking with Craig last week, I mean, the coronavirus isn't a virus that we've never seen before. It's been well known to spread amongst humans for decades with SARS and MERS, and obviously there's a few that are quite almost like a common cold, isn't it? That some of them, it's not really, they're not very dangerous at all. So we knew.
Well, it's a variant, isn't it? It's a variant. You know, it's not, and that's where a lot of these people who are very anti, or so at least suspicious about the vaccines, at least, or the diseases, how can you create something so quickly? And I know you want to talk about the trials process later on, but it's not as if we're starting from scratch.
No, absolutely. So yeah, the Pfizer and the Moderna, they're the mRNA ones, aren't they? That do that. So the Oxford AstraZeneca one, that's more traditional, isn't it? How does that one work?
Well, they use a virus, don't they, as the delivery mechanism for that. And I believe it's a virus that usually infects chimps that humans aren't really used to. So when that virus is put into our body, there isn't an automatic response to wreck it before it can deliver that to ourselves. But that delivers DNA straight. Well, the virus will invade our cells and then send the DNA into our nucleus, wherein it is then transcribed into mRNA,
and it does the same job. The same job as the Pfizer after that, isn't it? Yeah. So it's the
DNA. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say it's slight different mechanisms of delivery, but the effect after that is the same, isn't it? With the mRNA producing.
The process is the same. I think from what I've read, they go with the DNA because it's a lot more stable than mRNA. You can actually just keep it in the fridge. It doesn't degrade like mRNA does, so it's a longer shelf life, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. But the only problem with that is it's more difficult, isn't it, to keep up with the variants with that sort of a vaccine. With
right, so it'll take longer to to manipulate.
In terms of the figures, there doesn't seem to be too much difference in the efficiency of those two vaccines, the two different types, is there? I know the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca are quite, I think they're in the mid-90s, aren't they, for after two vaccines? So they're both as efficient each as other, but they work differently. But there's nothing to worry about, is there, in terms of the fact there's two different ones? I don't think. I mean, I know that's probably a more rational worry for people.
I think economically as well. I know AstraZeneca have come out and said they're not taking profit from this, and I mean the vaccines are far cheaper, aren't they?
Yes,
And in terms of how they were, I read about this earlier because obviously we're talking about vaccines, so I thought I'd better do some reading up. Maybe you've heard this, maybe you haven't, but are you aware of the when they were testing the AstraZeneca? That in America they gave people 2 full doses, that set distance apart.
Yeah.
And I think it was like a 60% efficiency rate to start with. But in the UK, the first dose they gave people was just half a dose.
Right.
And then the second dose was a full dose. And then that yielded like the over 90% efficiency rate. And I don't know why. Is that something you've heard of from one of your videos?
I've not seen that, no. Yeah, I
don't know why the difference would be there. And I've been looking all day to try and find out why that would be the case. And I haven't found an answer.
Odd. Very odd. But let's touch on that speed thing then. So because I think that is, from what I can tell, one of the most rational fears from the general population is how quickly that it was produced. Now, obviously, we've said that it's not a new virus. We've known of the virus before. A lot of research has been done into coronavirus vaccines already. But the difference being, we've got a virus which has, well, I said it at the beginning, 185 million cases and 4 million deaths. It became a real issue very quickly, didn't it?
Well, inventions born out of necessity, etc. Is what they say. And but also these vaccinations, excuse me, you know, the people are forgetting that there is emergency legislation to sort of like fast track vaccinations. And when we were talking about the AstraZeneca one a minute ago, only having in some tests like a 62% efficiency rating, that kind of efficiency rating wouldn't pass a normal vaccine. You know, it would have to go through and have that increase, but it's enough to pass as an emergency vaccine in this situation. So it's not that it's any more dangerous or anything like that. It's just, you know, we need it now. Let's get it out. 62% is better than nothing. Let's get going. Yeah. You know, and thankfully they're higher than that now anyway, aren't they? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, do you think there was a lot of pressure from world governments, the WHO, in terms of getting that vaccine out from all these companies?
I think there's been an awful lot of pride and showmanship because of it. I know when Trump was in power, it was often, you know, the vaccine that we've managed to create, and we're going to lead the world with it. And I know the UK obviously have been ahead of everybody else because of Brexit, etc. And Boris Johnson's been very quick to praise everybody for that. So I think there's a certain amount of governments patting themselves on the back and making a big song and dance. But you know, I think the companies who are making it, you know, they're just making it for the right reasons, aren't they? You know, just wherever it goes, it's going to
absolutely
stop the chain.
Traditionally, if you're waiting for a vaccine to be approved, there's so many steps, and you might have to wait for a long time, or you might have to wait for a grant or funding, or there's multiple steps where you might have to get back some information, and someone might be dragging their feet with that information or whatever, and it takes years and years and years. But there would have been none of that with these vaccines. There would have been probably a bottomless pit of money, and everyone on the top of their game trying to get this thing out as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. You know, so many minds, so many nations, you know, so much focus on it, and so many of the barriers removed as well, you know, not having to get it absolutely perfect in terms of its efficiency rate and etc., realizing that it's an emergency vaccine. And but that doesn't mean that they've cut corners on safety at all. No. I mean, there was at the very beginning, again with the AstraZeneca, the two cases, I think, was it in the UK, of blood clots that they weren't sure was associated with the vaccine or not, and it turned out it wasn't. Yeah. You know, but they're not pulling, cutting corners on that kind of thing. It's other barriers that are removed. You know, it's not a safety issue.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit actually about the trial and the approval process. It makes sense to move to that after, if we're talking about the speed of the vaccine. So initially, when you're trialing a vaccine, you're testing for, I think I've got this right, any sort of toxicity or things like that, aren't you? That's the first thing you're testing, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think you know, that there are, from my understanding, to help keep the, you know, whatever you've got in the vaccine, the active ingredients, if you like, the mRNA, to help keep those stable and from degrading, there is inevitably going to be things that you have to put into the vaccine that may, in large doses, for example, cause significant side effects, etc. Yeah. But they're not, you know, people often talk about mercury in vaccines, don't they, etc. And there's a fraction of mercury in a vaccine compared to what you get in a tin of tuna, you know. So absolutely. Although they're there, you've got to keep it realistic.
But it's, you know, you might as well say you're ingesting chlorine when you have salt. It's just you can't. It's that sort of levels, isn't it? It's, you know, it's not. It's there's so many different. What was the other one I heard? Lithium, I think, was one I heard. Possibly, I can't remember now. There's loads of people out there spreading loads of stuff about it. So yeah, they deal with the toxicity, then they deal with the side effects next, isn't it? And then after that,
they do. Sorry,
mate. I was going to say it's side effects, and then it's the efficiency. The efficiency after that, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I'm going to say the side effects are tracked. There is a board, like a body that keep track of exactly what the side effects are, and they monitor that really, really, really closely, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And this would have been, in terms of the numbers, pretty much the same as a normal vaccine trial, wouldn't it?
I believe so. I mean, how many was it? Were we in the realm of nearly 50,000 people had been exposed to the vaccine before it was approved?
I was going to say there was enough people around to try it on who were infected. There wouldn't have been. Obviously, they would have trialled it on non-infected as well. But it's just, I can understand why this would be a rational fear for people, that if you don't know much about vaccines, you don't know much about the approval process, you don't know much about the trials, you're worried about how quick it's come through. I can forgive that sort of hesitancy, couldn't you?
Oh, definitely. If someone said to me tomorrow, I take my car to the garage and they say, listen, we're gonna fit this brand new braking system. We developed it in about 3 months. It's brand new. It's not been in any of the car before. I'd be thinking, hang on, So I get it. I totally and utterly get it, because when all you know is this vaccine's come out really quickly, then that's all you know, and that's all you're going to base your judgment on.
Yeah.
But it isn't. They weren't starting from scratch. It's and they were open and honest. They were open and honest that the efficiency of this vaccine, it isn't as high. It's not going to guarantee anything, but it's a way to put some stumbling blocks in that transmission chain, which is what was needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I think what they said is, with the vaccinations and the people who have gained natural immunity from the virus, I think we're at something. I think it was over 90% immunity now. For that's what they've included. People who've only had one dose in that as well have some sort of immunity in the country, adult population. And that is, like you say, going to be a massive stumbling block for the virus.
Well, it protects even those people who hadn't been vaccinated, and good. I want everyone to be protected, but an inevitable consequence of that will be the people who walk around and, like, I refuse the vaccine. The virus isn't real. I've never had it, and it's their ignorance of the people around them and the behaviour of the people around them has shielded them from that. Yeah.
And I think it speaks as well with the fact, I mean, the cases have gone up in the UK slightly, haven't they? Up to around 20,000 again. But the deaths and the hospital admissions have not followed that same spike.
Well, I'd imagine, and again, you probably looked at the data a bit more closely than me, but I'd imagine that that's because the people who are getting the cases now are those who've been last on the list for vaccines. They're not the vulnerable or the old age, and the more willing, more able to fight it off, aren't they?
Exactly right. 18 to 29s are the largest group of case numbers at the moment, and they are obviously, as you say, the last group, the last adult population anyway. I know they've started talking about over 13s, haven't they?
Yes,
as well. Yeah. Okay, all right. We'll have a quick break, and then we'll start getting onto the serious stuff with these COVID vaccine deniers. It's Cat's Curiosity, mate. You got anything good for us?
Well, we'll say good. I do have something for you.
Okay.
Now, this is going to be one of those things where I mention it, and I just know from the bottom of my heart that everybody listening is going to be like, yeah, I know that. How did you not know it? But I genuinely didn't know this till today. And when I've Googled it, it is everywhere on the internet, everywhere on YouTube. I was like, how has that passed me by?
You never know.
But this is the point where you go, yeah, I've heard of it. But did you know that we've recently had a 8th continent classified?
Do you know what? I did and I didn't. So I saw a really quick headline, scanned it, did something else, completely forgot about reading it. So I kind of heard of it, but I haven't looked into the details. Okay.
That's a good sitting on the fence halfway. Yeah. Thanks. Makes me feel a little bit better. So the story kind of starts in 1642 with a guy called Abel Tasman, who was a little bit of a, maybe a story for another video. He was a little bit of a loose cannon, but he was an explorer and he wanted to kind of like sail the world. And he looked at the globe and he thought that the world was a little bit top heavy. If you look at all the continents on the northern hemisphere compared to the bottom, it was like, there must be, it couldn't have formed like that. Actually, there must be another large continent somewhere in the southern hemisphere we don't know. So he sailed the world and he ended up in New Zealand and he didn't find it. But it turns out that New Zealand is part of it. And the new continent that has been been now officially named new continent. It's called Zealandia, which I don't know. Is that name familiar to you, Zealandia?
It doesn't. Are they lumping all the Pacific Islands into this?
I'm not sure exactly how far it extends, but essentially it was part of the supercontinent, which was Gondwana.
Yeah.
And then as it broke away from that, it didn't kind of break very cleanly. It sort of stretched a little bit, become less buoyant, and it sank. And now there's only really New Zealand and a couple of little islands that are poking their head above water. And it's kind of been known for a time that there's this bit of crust there that's a little bit different to the oceanic crust around it.
Right.
And it's geographically isolated by like a 4 kilometer long trough. But in 2017, so we're looking back 4 years now. Again, I'm a bit slow on things. They matched up everything they knew about the continent with the criteria for something to be a continent, and it passed.
Okay.
So do you know any of the criteria for being a continent?
I don't actually. No.
Neither did I. You have to be a landmass that is significantly taller than the oceanic crust around you.
Okay.
You have to be a landmass that contains a broad variety of different rocks. So you must have sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic, whereas the oceanic crust is mainly just igneous rock.
Yeah.
You have to have quite a significant area. Now, although Zealandia isn't as big as other continents, it's still twice as big as what would be classed as like a minor continent.
Right.
And oh my word, your depth as well. Continents are around about 5 to 7 times deeper than continental crust, and they are also was it less dense or more dense than the crust around them? I've forgotten. I had all this committed to memory, but there's 5 criteria anyway. A scientific paper showed that it did pass that criteria. So there is another continent under the ground.
Wow.
And that's now official. Well,
wow.
Under the ground, under the sea.
And New Zealand are pretty much the main constituents of that continent.
They are. And one of the reasons people kind of oppose them being a continent is because there's so little of that landmass above the water.
Yeah.
But the geologists who wrote the paper kind of said, well, look, if you take the water away, we define a continent by the land mass and how it compares to the crust around it, and it passes all those features. I'm sure, so it's been a long battle.
Yeah, I'm sure New Zealanders won't be too worried about having to step away from Australia in terms of being in the same continent.
No, I'm sure they won't. I wonder if it'll ever get recognised in another ring on the Olympics. But there's only 5 on the Olympics anyway, isn't there? Why is there only 5?
Yeah, there is only 5. Well, you can take Antarctica out, but which is the other one you wouldn't include?
I'm not sure. Maybe that's another one for a bit of trivia next week.
Yeah. All right, we'll look that up. Thanks, mate. That was interesting. I did, as I say, I did see it, but I didn't read about it. So, and as a lot of people know, I love my countries. I can recite every country in the world.
Wow, you know that is good going. How many are there?
Well, 197. But there's a few grey areas on who recognises what. The Palestine-Israel thing, but I can also identify every flag from every country in the world as well. That's how sad I am.
That's great, mate.
There you go. Right, okay, let's crack on. So, the side effects. So, here in the UK, they've stopped under 40s having the AstraZeneca vaccine. And that is not necessarily because they cause clots, but there is a minute risk that they could, and they're reducing the risk for the people under 40 because they are less affected by COVID, aren't they? And like with everything, there's going to be side effects, isn't there? With any sort of vaccine, any sort of medicine, any sort of drug, there is side effects.
Anything at all, and the way we teach it at schools, when mainly features when we talk about X-rays, etc. But
yeah,
you've got that risk versus reward. Nobody wants to bombard themselves with radiation in an X-ray. Nobody wants to do it. However, if you've got a broken leg and it needs to be fixed, then you look at the risk, you look at the reward, and it needs to be done. And it's the same with, yes, of course, anything like that is going to offer some sort of risk, but you compare that to the reward, and the risk is so slim, isn't it? I think I I read it was somewhere between 1 in 60,000 and 1 in 100,000, wasn't it, of a minor blood clot?
Yeah. And if you actually look at the figures for just getting a blood clot in normal life without having taken anything, they're quite similar, aren't they, those statistics?
So it is such a minor increase, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that we're just talking here about purely the AstraZeneca. I don't know of anything major from the mRNA vaccines. I've heard a little bit or read a little bit about the what was it? It's about the enlarged heart or something like that among athletes.
Right, okay.
After
No,
the
that's
mRNA.
great, yeah.
And I mean, as you know, I am a very keen runner. But as you say, risk v reward. The reward for me is greater than the risk. I run 40 miles a week. I was due to run 15 miles the day after I had my first vaccination with Pfizer. I didn't, simply because I was worried about if I felt rough or something after the jab. So I only run 6 miles instead and did the 15 miles the day after.
The thing is, what we're talking about here is like you just identified it there. You're expecting to feel a little bit rough after you've had a vaccine and we know why. You know, when we talk about side effects, we're talking about those minor short-term risks of clots. Yeah. But the anti-vaxxers and the conspiracists, every time someone says, "Oh, I had a vaccine and I had a vaccination and I felt a bit rough the next day," to them, that's the big sign it's making you ill, and they don't understand that is the immune response.
Exactly, yeah, and that immune response is sometimes greater after the second one, isn't it? Because obviously your body is already has those antigens to protect you, so there is sometimes a greater response, isn't there? And you feel a bit worse after the second one.
Yeah, you're more primed. Your memory cells are there. Like I say, it's a much faster immune response, isn't it? It's much more intense. Again, which is why these vaccinations are given in 2 doses. It's to mimic. You know, I think my wife had the vaccine, and I think I remember telling you this just on WhatsApp. Yeah. She had the vaccine a few weeks ago, and she was awfully rough for the next day because it wasn't too long before that she'd actually had COVID, and obviously her immune system was still primed for that response.
Yeah. So, to me, within reason, it doesn't really matter what those side effects are, as long as they are extremely small risk. I mean, it'd be ridiculous to say, for example, they did the vaccine and said, well, I mean, sorry, but there's a 50% chance of whatever. Then that risk is way too great. Yeah. Isn't it? So for me, it doesn't really matter because I know there's going to be side effects to these sorts of things. There's side effects to having paracetamol. There's side effects to having Nurofen or whatever. I know that's going to be the case, but the reward of taking this vaccine, not just for you, but for the country as a whole, is far greater than any risk to me. Yeah,
it is such a tiny risk, but we know what the conspiracy-minded are like. If that, you know, as long as somebody says there is a small risk, that is what they jump on. You know, they don't step back and see the big picture. And like I said, it could be there's risk to eating a tin of tuna with mercury, having a hamburger, cooking bacon, things that they do all the time. You know, having a drink of lager, having a cigarette or whatever, bring far more risk.
There's a risk of the first time you eat your nuts. That's a risk.
Absolutely.
You know, you never know, do you? But I want to talk a little bit about this yellow card system, because I know a lot of the conspiratorial people with the vaccines, they lean on this quite heavily, don't they, the yellow card system. But we need to just clarify that this yellow card system is something where the general population can go onto this website, with the government website, and they can put in any sort of side effect that they want, which isn't necessarily caused by the vaccine, but which they suspect could have been, or which appeared after getting the vaccine. But there's no link to there's no definitive link, is there, from these yellow card inputs to the vaccine?
No, like I said, I mean, you just told me a while ago, 22% of the world's population or adult population have been vaccinated. If you look at the millions and millions of people, you know, in Britain alone, the millions of people who've been vaccinated without the vaccine, without anything else, how many of those are going to get ill at some point?
Yeah.
How many of those are going to feel a bit rough? Of course, we're dealing with huge numbers. People are going to experience that no matter what. And there'll be a lot of that on there. But the government are looking, they're analysing data, they're looking for patterns and trends, aren't they? So an individual putting whatever they feel on a particular day isn't a statement, it's a statement if it's part of a larger pattern and trend.
Yeah. I don't know if you know the figures for this, because I'm not sure if I've looked, but I know the yellow card, you always see them rolling out this image, don't you, of 1,200 deaths caused by vaccine on the yellow card system. Now, again, there's nothing to confirm that these deaths are related to the vaccine. Do you know the actual is it something like 6 or something, the actual figures for deaths caused by the vaccine?
I'm not familiar with what it actually is. Obviously, the 1,000 or that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's no evidence at all for anything like that. I'm not sure exactly what it is, though. Is it as low as 6?
It's quite low. I mean, as with anything, like we were talking about, there is a risk. You could have an adverse reaction, an allergic reaction to something in the vaccine, which could be enough to kill these people. But it is very, very small. The official number is extremely small. It might be more than 6 now, but in the UK anyway, and it might only be for one vaccine, but it's certainly not over 1,000. Certainly not.
And it's tragic when things like that happen, especially for people trying to do the right thing. It is tragic. But like I say, these people are obviously predisposed with, something. And no, it is very sad. But and I hate to play the numbers game. I hate to do it. But actually, how many lives is the vaccine going to save?
Yeah. Well, I think officially, the government have said that I think it's 27,000 lives have been saved so far because of the vaccine program. And bearing in mind that the UK is currently on 128,000 deaths, a majority of which happened over the winter, didn't they? With the big spike in the winter. 27,000 saved because of the vaccine program. Well, you're talking 20% aren't you, of that figure?
It's when you think about it in terms of those numbers, it is quite staggering, isn't it? It is quite quite staggering.
Yeah. So this yellow card system, I don't think it should be taken with a pinch of salt, shouldn't it? In terms of we can't take that as read as being the problems with the vaccines, can we?
Oh God, not at all. No. Like I said, if people in such a large sample group are going to get ill, and if that happens to be around at the time they got the vaccine, they're going to put it on the system, aren't they? But you've got to trust the way the data is being analysed, and like I say, the patterns and trends that emerge from it. And if those patterns and trends aren't there, then it's good enough for me. Yeah,
absolutely. I've just had a quick look. So 45 million people have had the first dose in the UK, and 33 million have had the second dose. Even if that 1,000 deaths was true, that is still an extremely small percentage from 78 million doses.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. Even if it is true, which we know it's not, but even if it is true, it's still an incredibly small percentage. And as you say, it's sad. It's sad when that sort of thing happens, but as we say, any drug can cause any sort of allergic reaction for anyone. One of the biggest things that I got off the back of these videos is people arguing about long-term side effects. I mean, I know that the trial process, even once the vaccine has been approved, there's still like a phase 4 where we're looking at the reactions and we're looking at the cases of vaccines and what's happened in terms of the reactions to them. How are we classing these long-term side effects? Because it's been 7-8 months now, isn't it?
Do you mean how are they officially being classed, or how are we just...
How are they officially being classed?
That's a good question. I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure.
Okay.
So how helpful is that?
I mean, it's difficult though, because it's been 8 months and there hasn't been a disaster, has there? It's not, but if something was going to go wrong really badly, it would have happened by now after 8 months, wouldn't it?
And that's it. And you see people around Twitter, you know, who are denying still the pandemic ever existed, and you know they'll come out with comments like, "Well, you know, you just hurry up and get your virus, and you'll be dead soon enough. Your vaccine, sorry, and you'll be dead soon enough because of it, etc." Yeah, but we are, like I said, at the point where 70 odd million doses of vaccine have been given out to people. Where are all the people suffering because of it? And where is the harm?
Exactly. And what did I say at the beginning? How many people worldwide have been vaccinated now?
22%, you said?
3 billion.
3 billion, well.
3.22 billion doses. 3.22 billion doses have been administered. And I think it's fair to say if there were some real long-term effects, we would have seen that by now, wouldn't we?
Yeah,
absolutely. Off 3.22 billion doses.
I think somebody would have noticed. So we'd all know somebody, you know, we all know, I'm sure multiple people now who've had the vaccine.
Yeah.
And how many people out there actually know people who are suffering horrendous long-term? I've not heard of anybody.
And we want to talk about long-term effects. We're completely, in this conversation, not talking about those people that are suffering with long COVID at all. Because there's some real people struggling with long COVID, isn't there?
Yeah, I know somebody who... you know, key musician, keen guitarist, keen footballer, and you know can't stand to be in a place where there's any loud noise at the minute because it kicks in like really bad headaches and you just if they do any kind of exertion, any kind of exercise, it's extreme lethargy for the next 2 or 3 days, wipes them out. They've got to be in bed, and this is 7 or 8 months after they've had COVID. They're really suffering.
Yeah, and that's quite common, isn't it? We're seeing this. We're seeing this a lot. So not only are we not seeing long-term side effects from vaccines, if we're not having these vaccines, more people are going to have long-term side effects from COVID. I think that's fair.
Absolutely,
fair to say. Well, mate, listen, we've covered as much as we can. I have a video coming out next week. Now, I don't know if you've seen this. A guy called Mark Sexton. I spoke to you about it, didn't I? He went into a police station where he lived to make a criminal complaint regarding his MP and the UK government to insist an immediate ceasing of the vaccine programme. He had this yellow card data. He had all of this data. That he spent 45 minutes. He recorded a video of himself giving this information across to a PC at this police station. Now, obviously, it's all gumph. And we can disprove it. A lot of the stuff, Mr. Sensible's done a cracking job dissecting this PDF because he said he'd found a report from Slovakia regarding the PCR tests and how they're leaving stuff in people and people are dying from PCR. So Mr. Sensible found this PDF and he's basically ripped it apart. The whole thing leads back to a website where, would you believe it, Flat Earth is on it. So and a lot of this guy's stuff he's doing is off the back of this report. The problem I have with it, he's got 15,000 followers on Facebook, and he makes a post and everyone's patting him on the back. It's not good.
Well, I mean, who else have we seen like that? Peter Ebdon.
Oh yeah, saw that today, didn't we? He actually said psyop, didn't he?
He did, yeah. You know, he retweets a lot of these people. Yeah. That when you actually look at these people are the likes of flat earthers. You know, the people he retweets, I'll have a look at the posts they've mentioned, and it's absolute garbage. But it's a typical sort of mindset that we've become used to. They are convinced of, you know, that this is some sort of psyop or it's fake or whatever. Yeah. And that's it. Now they're convinced. If somebody else has done some homework for them, you know, they're only too quick to shout it out and pat them on the back for it, aren't they? They're not going to sit and analyse it and
it's very
check it.
Very, very dangerous when people have a following like that and they're spreading this sort of stuff. So I think it is important that we try and do as much as we can on this. I know you do it. You have your little squabbles on Twitter with people, don't you, about that sort of stuff?
I do try and get some people to engage every now and then because I think it'll make a good video. Yeah, but I want Peter Ebdon to get back to me again because it was a nice chat last time.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, we should try and get him on, shouldn't we? That would be cracking if we get Peter Ebdon on.
be superb.
I'll ask my sister. She still talks to all the snooker players. She used to go to every single tournament.
Oh, right.
It's about 10 years ago now, but she used to follow them all, every single tournament, drink with them in the hotel and stuff like that. I'll see if she can get hold of Peter Ebdon, because she'll know Steve Maguire. She's quite good friends with Steve Maguire. And who was the other one that won the world title? Sean Murphy.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah. He's a nice guy.
Yeah. So I'll see if she's still got the contact. She might not, because it was a long time ago. But yeah, we'll see if we can do it. Right. Thank you, mate. Thanks for that. Really good chat. Hopefully we'll get this out, and hopefully we can just put people's minds at ease. Really, I think that was the main goal of today.
Yeah, I think so. And it is important. And like you said before, it is understandable for even totally normal, non-conspiratorial people to have that question. Oh, how do they manage to do that so quick? Yeah. Is it going to be, it's a perfectly normal question to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks, mate. Next week, we've got conspiracy debunking king Mick West. So we'll chat to him. He's done a lot of stuff on those American UFOs recently, so we can talk to him about that. That'd be quite interesting. But other than that, we're done. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week. Have a great week. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.